Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 7 of Logicast, the AWS News Podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Karl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by John, as always, Goodall, as always. How are you doing today, John?
Leaning into that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can't complain.
I'm liking the size of the AWS emblem on your left breast today.
Yeah, it's big shout out to, I think it's Tembile. I'm sorry, I don't quite know how to pronounce your name. For sending a load of user group swag, and obviously as a lead, I get first pick.
Did you try on the different sizes, or did you
Yes,
know
yes, I did.
immediately? You did. Okay, fair enough. What did you land on?
This is an XL, which is pretty normal for me.
It's a very personal question for me to be asking, actually, isn't it? I shouldn't really be asking those sorts of questions on the podcast. Anyway, on that note, let's introduce our guest for today. And rest assured, Ryan, I'm not going to ask you what your t-shirt size is, but we are joined today by fellow AWS Community Builder Ryan Cormack. How are you doing today, Ryan?
Hey everyone, yeah, hey Karl, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about what you do for a living and for the AWS community.
So I don't want to throw out, I've got my swag on too though, but I think I've got an AWS Community Summit t-shirt on, but it's a retro artifact at this point. I think it's 2 or 3 years old, which is kind of...
Is that an old floppy? Is that a 5 1/4? 5 1/2, whatever it is?
Yeah, it may well be.
We said we weren't going to ask him about awkward size questions, John.
I didn't say inside leg.
I actually thought you had a sticker on your t-shirt. I didn't realize it's actually part of the design, like a name badge or something at a meetup.
So I've been an AWS Community Builder for a couple of years now, building out my renewal application for year 3. So fingers crossed for that. But outside of that, I'm currently a principal engineer working at Motorway, one of the UK's fastest online growing used car marketplace, which is a very fun day job. Lots of AWS things and building. I guess that's continuing to support our growth across the country. And outside of that, I've actually been building stuff in AWS for 10, maybe 11 years now. Did used to work in a data center, so I have been there watching people swap out hard drives and remembering the good old days before things like S3 and SQS existed. I've maybe got a legacy EC2 public instance kicking around somewhere with AWS accounts. That should have all been killed. But for the community builds program, I try and talk a lot about serverless distributed systems, I guess breaking down and decomposing the monolith, sort of things that I've worked on maybe the last 5-6 years across some of the, I guess, largest e-com companies across UK and a bit further.
Nice. And you did actually come and do a talk at our local AWS Brighton user group last year about EDA, I think.
That is, yeah, how we're approaching, I guess, decomposing some of the monoliths at Motorway, embracing our event-driven or event-first serverless architecture to help us continue to scale and grow some of the impressive growth numbers that we've had over the last few years.
And it was a very popular talk, well received by the audience, lots of questions. So if you get a chance to go and see Ryan delivering that talk or another talk, check out his profile, and I'm sure you'll find out where he's going to be speaking. And very interested to hear that you actually know how this stuff works in the background as well, because I think there's a lot of what I like to call console jockeys these days who only know what happens in the console and don't really know what, when you press that button, what it's actually firing off in the background. So yeah, I've spent a fair bit of time in data centers myself, caused
yeah, but you were just on like a tour and
no, I've caused a spanning tree loop by plugging network cable into what was supposedly a unconfigured port. I just plugged it into the cable that the engineer told me to plug it into. He didn't know that there was some config on it.
It's a DHCP storm.
Obviously, I couldn't see that because I was in the data center, but yeah.
USB-C is like universal serial bus, right? You should universally accept any wire you put in, you're good to go.
Absolutely, yeah.
Why is yes, I did. You've put a USB cable in an Ethernet port. That's why.
But I have been a data center tour guide more than an engineer back in the days when people buying cloud wanted to actually see the data center and were allowed to go and see the data center. So yeah, touring people around pointing at racks and hot cold dials and UPS systems and fire HVAC systems and fire suppression systems and so on and so forth. So all that's logged in there somewhere. Fascinating days. I do miss that actually, but maybe those days will come again. Who knows? Anyway, on that note, we're not here to talk about data centers. We are here to talk about cloud, and specifically AWS Cloud and what's new in the AWS Cloud. So as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John and I pick a selection of the articles from the newsletter that we'd like to talk about with our guests. And we do, of course, give the guests an opportunity to switch those articles out if there's something else they'd like to talk about. And Ryan's done that. And we'll come to that later. It's a collaborative process, this content generation. So we do, of course, have such an agreed set of articles for us to talk about this week. And the first one is just a new feature announcement about AWS Step Functions. And the title is AWS Step Functions expands data source and output for distributed map. Now, I did read the article. It's only 3 paragraphs. Still none the wiser, really. So I'm looking forward to. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a feature announcement. So it's 3 paragraphs, and I'm still a little none the wiser. So I'm looking forward to you, John, explaining this as you always do. So what's exciting about this one for you?
I mean, I just wanted to talk about distributed map more than the feature specifically, because distributed map is really cool. So, right, I haven't done this for a while, so let's do some definitions. Step functions. I'm a big fan of step functions. We are users of step functions in our post-recording workflow. So if you've read my recent blog, and I'm going to dine out on that for as long as I possibly can. If you've read my recent blog, you'll know that we run the outputs of this through step function, and that does a whole bunch of orchestration for us, calls that to a bunch of lambdas and does a bunch of other cool stuff. Step functions are great because they are distributed orchestration for serverless workflows. Specifically, it's things like event driven that you can use them for. You don't have to, but by and large, that's what they're for. And there's a number of different ways you can use them. You can kind of do the standard one thing after another, and that just gives you a better way of tracking like your workflows, if you like, rather than using choreography. You can do things like parallel processing in branch states, and what you can do with a map state and a distributed map, because there's 2 different versions of this, is you can run over a big chunk of input, break that down into a whole bunch of little bits of input and run them in parallel in a bunch of lambdas. I think the original map had, Ryan will probably correct me if I'm wrong on this one, the original map was something like 40 concurrent that you could do at the same time, and then distributed map is something stupid like 10,000 or something ridiculous. And distributed map is just really cool if you have big data sets that you need to work through. What this change is doing is it's allowing you to basically pull in different file formats from S3 using JSONL, JSONLs. I don't fully understand that because I haven't really dug into it. And it just gives you a lot more options to process these whacking great data sets that you are using this for. For a lot of people using step functions, this is probably not groundbreaking stuff, because by and large, it's a fairly niche use case, I think, processing these whacking great data sets. But if you do that and you know that you need to do that, you should go and have a read on this and look this up. And then on top of this, step functions more generally supports JSON as well at the moment. So I'd like to see how this will interplay, but whether it does or not at the moment, I don't know.
Your thoughts on this one, Ryan?
I think it's kind of interesting to see how much the step function service is starting to change. So John mentioned JSONL, a big, nice announcement from a couple of months ago now, and the continued investment on making step functions better, and I'm going to say slightly easier to use, is definitely a nice thing there. And all these sorts of extra bits on the side are always really, really helpful. I think there was a couple of big themes from reInvent a couple of months ago on data processing, particularly things like S3 data tables or S3 tables using the iceberg format, which I think is comma separated, but more and more of these abilities to use things like step functions to process huge data sets, regardless of what the delimiter is, definitely makes it a welcome change. I think the big benefit here, I think for a lot of people, is that they don't have to change their maybe colon separated data sets into a CSV file. We can just start using some of the more native processing capabilities that we're going to get in step functions. So a big win for DX. Nice to see the step functions DX process there continue to improve.
Cool. So less manipulation of data required prior to using.
Well, it's not even data manipulation, is it? It's just it's undifferentiated heavy lifting, as AWS loves that term. They love it. And the big thing here, as Ryan says, is previously distributed map supported JSON and CSV. Now it supports JSONL with the new delimited file format, so semicolon and tab delimited. So if you, for reasons hitherto unknown to science, have to use a tab delimited file because you're using Excel or something in your process, and Excel for some reason really likes tab delimited, don't ask me why, but it does, you don't have to muck around doing a sed or a find and replace to go through that just to make it go through your workflow. It will just work with it. Or conversely, you don't have to then take a CSV in and then process it into tab delimited for your downstream. You can just kind of work with it as is, which is nice.
Cool. Well, a lot of love for this this feature announcement. On that note, let's move along to our second article for this week, which is another feature announcement. This one's all about how you can reshape your AWS CloudFormation stacks seamlessly with stack refactoring. So, John, I know what a stack is. Why would I want to refactor it?
I take exception to the word seamless in this announcement. I take exception to that. So, okay, let's work through an example, and then we'll try and get into why this is a nice thing. So, if you have historically deployed one massive CloudFormation stack for all of your resources, so that's your VPC, that's your database, we've all done it. It's your VPC, it's your database, it's your web servers, it's your scaling group, it's EFS, it's the whole kit and caboodle, right? You are, for starters, you're a bad person, but we've all done it. So this sort of thing does happen. You don't really want massive CloudFormation stacks because it makes the process of updating them slow and a bit risky and potentially error prone, because you might have had, you might have a security group rule that's drifted manually, but you don't really care that it's drifted manually when all you actually need to do is change the instance type in your scaling group. And all of a sudden things are going to start falling over because the world doesn't agree with CloudFormation anymore. Okay, you should be making all your changes through IAC, but you probably haven't because, again, you're a bad person. But everybody does it because it's one of those things that just kind of has to get done from time to time. The way you would have done this if you've deployed using something sensible like Terraform is you can basically tell Terraform, look, I've updated it. Can you do a refresh and just read the state in, please? Wonderful. Or you can break things out and move things between state files, and that works quite well. With CloudFormation, if you needed to drop and import a resource, that was a complete palaver. It was multiple steps. You couldn't just kind of do it in 2 or 3 commands. You had to do lots of uploads to CloudFormation itself and fiddle with the template, and it was very painful. What this is doing is this is allowing you a somewhat easier way of taking resources out of your very large stack and making smaller stacks out of them, which is very needed. And it's something that, okay, you can kind of do with Terraform, but it's particularly not easy because you have to kind of do it manually and one resource at a time, and that sucks. As far as I can work out, this is similar to that in that you sort of go, well, this needs to go over here, and this needs to go over here, and this needs to go over here. But you previously couldn't do that, and now you can. So if you're stuck with CloudFormation, and I do use the word stuck on purpose, this might make your life a little bit less horrible.
So Ryan, I'm guessing by the face that you pulled when John spoke about the one monolithic stack that you've created something like this, and this could benefit you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was maybe looking back 6 or 7 years ago. There used to be a limit of maybe 150 resources, I think, in the stack, and maybe 4 years ago that got changed to 500. But I got stung years ago. It was 150 resources. But then your Lambda functions, API gateways, your execution roles, your invocation roles, resource policies, a bunch of stuff. It can add up kind of quick, and I got stung in the past there. But of all of the announcements this week, this is the one that I think, or I could see anyway, having the largest or biggest benefit to the most amount of people. Because CloudFormation is in a lot of places, right? And it's in the CDK, and it's very easy to get going with CloudFormation on AWS. But eventually, I have certainly found in the past that you get to that point where you think, wow, I really, really wish there had something like John mentioned, that ability that Terraform's got to just move a resource between stacks and off you go. And it hasn't been super easy to do in the past with CloudFormation. Maybe it's easier to do it now. And starts to, I guess, get some of the really, really nice behaviors, features, and services that other infrastructure as code providers have got. So I could definitely see this being a really, really big win for quite a lot of people. And CloudFormation is another service that's been getting a lot of love recently, which is really good to see.
Have you tried it yet? I mean, not CloudFormation. Obviously, you've tried CloudFormation. The refactoring, stack refactoring.
I think I haven't tried it actually. I think I'm thankful that I've learned my lesson of yesteryear and would rather have multiple small stacks than one big stack. And off I go like that. The CDK makes it really, really easy to have multiple stacks in a single repository or deployment. So that's where I've been living my best life since then. And I guess more professionally, I've been on that Terraform boat for a while.
It's a funny one, right? I mean, I bash CloudFormation quite a bit, but there's a number of things that Terraform, until reasonably recently, and I think to an extent now, just does badly compared to something like CDK or SAM. It's my kind of personal favorite. Things like Lambda packaging and all that jazz, because Terraform is terrible at that. It's utterly terrible at that. You have to do it all manually. You have to use null provisioners and all this kind of nonsense. Whereas SAM or CDK, you just go, oh, build that like that, use ES build, off you go. So there's still a use case for it. And yes, if you've ended up with, I mean, the way I've dealt with that, lots of resources in one place is things like nested stacks, but then that's still painful. So this is good. We like this.
Awesome. On that note, let's move along to our third article for this week. This is an article from the AWS Networking and Content Delivery blog, all about AWS Verified Access support for non-HTTP resources, which went into general availability last week. And Ryan, I think this is the one that you were particularly keen to talk about. So I'll come to you first on this. Give us your thoughts.
It's a really, really interesting one. So verified access allows this, I guess, almost like no trust process into accessing what is essentially private resources. So if we're building things out in AWS, you put your public and your private networks inside your VPC. And as being good citizens, we always put our databases inside our private networks. So we lose the ability to easily connect to them from our local machines if you want to debug a staging or a development issue. It's really, really hard to connect. And the solution to this in the past has often been having Bastion hosts running on EC2 or things like Fargate, where we can connect the Bastion to the jump box, and then, because that's in the private network, and connect through to our database. It's a lot of moving parts and it becomes a little bit painful to do. This change here allows us to connect to our private databases through the verified access AWS service without having to need to go through this process of managing Bastion hosts and jump boxes and things like that. So I think, again, for a lot of people who are managing these things, rather than having to manage security groups that allow specific IP addresses in, or having to manage Bastion hosts that need patch maintained, updated, this is, I think, a really, really nice offering from the team to allow us to easily start accessing some of our private resources when we need to, not always necessarily always. And I think it integrates with things like your single sign-on providers, which is a big win for enterprise customers.
So in effect, it is like a managed Bastion host.
Yeah, I think a little bit like a managed Bastion host. There's some differences in that, I guess, Bastion host, once you've figured out how to connect to it, I guess we may use SSH keys or something like that, then you can move on. But with verified access, it's very much token scoped to the individual user. So it is permission set per user access to it, rather than, which I'm sure no one does, but here's the SSH key to the Bastion box. People connect if they need to. We promise we'll rotate it.
And I think it requires a client, right, on the user's machine.
It does, yeah. I think there's support for Mac and Linux clients. I don't think there's support for Windows clients yet, but I suspect that's maybe coming soon. Not sure. Or I guess use a Mac.
You'll never look back.
Do you even Linux, bro? Yeah,
John, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of glossed over this when reading through, and then kind of dug back into it, and it kind of makes sense. So Bastion hosts are one of the banes of my existence. There's several banes of my existence, but Bastion hosts is one of them. I viewed them as something of a necessary evil, right? It's something that people are if you're moving from a world where you can directly access servers, databases, whatever, and you're now not able to do that because we're being good internet people and putting our databases in private subnets, and we're putting our web servers in private subnets, and we're putting behind load balancers and all this jazz, then it can be a little bit painful going through that. I can't get to it directly, but you jump through this box. Here's a load of documentation on how to do it, and most of your tools that you're already using, CyberDuck, FileZilla, MySQL Workbench, pick a tool, will probably cope with this quite handily. There's a how do you connect to it? Over SSH, put my details in, and it will cope with that. This takes the need for a Bastion out, which is great, in the same way that we got really, really excited probably a year or so ago now about EC2 Instance Connect endpoints, because again, that's basically a managed Bastion. You didn't have to worry about it so long as the security group rules are a bit fiddly to get right, depending on like where it was and where it was listed and all that jazz. And it took away the need for a Bastion host, and that was brilliant. But that's limited to port 22, so you couldn't do arbitrary port forwarding. You could actually to start with, and then within a few months, AWS patched that because they worked out that people were doing really big data exfiltration through RDS and not paying their egress fees, which is just fantastic. It was fantastic. And then they patched that, so it was then down to port 22 only. But when it first came out, you could access like 3306, and it just worked. It was great. I like this, the theory behind this. I don't think it's going to get mass adoption until it starts integrating better with third-party tools. Now, the client, okay, I get that. You're going to need that. You're going to need some sort of way of handling and integrating with AWS SSO or ID Center or whatever you want to call it these days. But until this can integrate natively with things like Table Plus, MySQL Workbench, pick a tool, you're going to struggle to get any real adoption with this.
Do you concur, Ryan, or do you? Because I know you were excited about this one.
I am. I still think it's a great step in the right direction. There's loads of like zero trust access providers out there. I think this is nice for AWS to sort of make this a bit more native and baked it in. Verified permissions as a service too is also really interesting. You don't have to just use it for this, right? You can use it for authorization through API gateways and Incognito. It makes things similar. So it shares a similar sort of language, the Cedar policy language that they've got for it, which is an open source language, and you can define your permissions across a whole bunch of services. So it's, I guess, really nice that they're moving a bit more things together to try and simplify some things in some places.
Cool. Well, sounds like a good step in the right direction. So it'll be interesting to see whether John's adoption forecast comes true and see how.
Well, the problem here, it's not an AWS problem as such. It's a rest of the market problem. And the rest of the market can't get there. It's not chicken and egg. The chicken has to come before the egg because the chicken laid the damn thing, right? This had to
hang
come
on a minute.
first.
This is a bit more of a.
Well, the egg came
debate,
first. The egg came first, strictly speaking, because reptiles lay eggs. Shut up. This had to come first before the rest of the market could catch up and start integrating it. So this had to happen before anything else could happen following on. But I'd like to start seeing this integrated in, the litany of tools that people use to talk to databases and servers and stuff.
Cool. Well, let's see how it evolves. Let's move on to our next article for this week. And of course, it was recently quarterly results time. I think we spoke in the last episode or two about some of the articles that we've seen around quarterly results. This one's a little bit more positive because obviously you always get the naysayers. Oh, the growth has slowed down. It's not meet market expectations, etc. But the title of this article on computerweekly.com is AWS sees full year profit and revenue growth as AI and public cloud demand soars. So I want to try and delve into that a little bit. But I mean, if we look at some of the numbers, AWS has grown significantly. And I had the numbers here somewhere. Here they are. So revenue jumped 19% to 28.8 billion versus last year, and profits up to 10.6 billion from, I think, 7.1 the same quarter last year. So some pretty impressive revenue and profit growth over the previous year. I mean, those jumps, I mean, are bigger than most other businesses in the world. So, the growth does continue to be staggering, albeit slowing down a bit. But what I thought was interesting was that they claimed that it's as a result of AI demand. Is it really, do we think? Because we don't see that broken down anywhere. I think the only people that know that are people who work within
I don't know
AWS.
that AI. I don't know that it's directly responsible, but there's certainly an element of that because AI is being pushed real hard, and it's certainly AI and model training is certainly going to be a big cost driver for AWS for just GPUs, chips, power, all the rest of it. I found particularly interesting about this. Ignore the AI for a minute because meh. Was the amount of time we spent last kind of year talking about the growth slowing, it's shrinking, cloud repatriation. Well, that didn't happen, did it?
No, it didn't. No, it absolutely did not. Yeah. But what are your thoughts, Ryan? Do you, if you were to hazard a guess, how much do you think is really coming from AI type services versus traditional infrastructure?
The more I'm using some of the new gen AI tools, the more I can see myself like having them become a reasonable part of my the bill for my AWS accounts. Like personal, professionally, like Gen AI is like I think it's growing. I definitely think it's growing, and that is definitely part of this this bill and this revenue increase that we've got here. And it isn't just, I guess, it isn't just the AWS models. It isn't people using things like Nova and Titan. It's people using things like Amazon Q to integrate with Connect. People using Amazon Q as the AI agentic partner copilot inside your IDE. It's people using things like Claude. Claude's set a suite of models on Bedrock to do things that they need to through this. The more I use it, the more I'm seeing myself liking to use it even more. Certainly over the last 6 months or so, all of these tools seem like they're getting really better all the time.
Yeah, it does feel
can't
like
see
it's
that
just
growth
sort of
slowing.
happening. People just keep recommending things to me that I've never heard of, and I look at them and I think, oh, that's really good. And I just start using them. As a non-technical user, just kind of AI-driven search engines and content
I
generation
spent a
tools and that
long
kind of thing.
time. I spent a long time last year being a big AI skeptic, and now I'm using it daily for a lot of things. I'm not going to plug it specifically, but yeah, AI type search engines just as a better way of interacting with the internet because it's how do I do this? English language question. My ability to Google was always above average because I work in tech, but I don't need to care. It's how do I do this? I'm going to look through 20 sources on the internet, spit it out for you in a nice summary, and here's all the things I read, so you can go and validate it. And okay, it's gotten 60 or 70% of the right answer, but it's like, oh, yeah, got it, and that just shaves actual hours off of my time.
Absolutely. I use Perplexity to summarize the articles
Bingo.
this week, so I have a few
I like
bullet points here
Perplexity.
rather than reading the whole thing. But yeah, I've
I
started
like
using it quite a
Perplexity. I
bit.
use it quite a lot, actually. I use it quite a lot because of the whole referencing thing that it does, which is great. I'm even considering actually paying for it because the Pro is so much better.
What do you think about Mark Zuckerberg's claims? Not in this article, we're kind of digressing now, but another article somebody shared with me recently that Mark Zuckerberg expects that by 2025, all mid-level devs in Meta will be replaced by AI agents.
He's wrong. Fundamentally, he's wrong. I mean, about everything in life ever, to be really honest. That man is wrong about everything. Yes, okay, billionaire, but honestly, if I met him in the street, I'd just walk right past him. Like nothing to say to that man. No, I think he's wrong. I don't think this is going to replace developers at all, ever, under any circumstances. Okay, this might be the same thing as the head of IBM saying the world will eventually need 5 computers, but I would stake my not any money because I don't have any, but I think he's wrong. Fundamentally, I think he's wrong. It's AI is still wrong so much of the time because all an LLM is actually doing is intelligent guesses of the next most likely word to be spat out in an answer. So you still need someone behind that layer to interpret the response. So, nah, don't buy it.
What do you think, Ryan? What have you been
There's a-
playing with? If that's not a personal question, I meant AI tools, obviously. So, yeah.
We mentioned undifferentiated heavy lifting earlier, and we spoke about CloudFormation CDK, all right. And back a long time ago in a job far, far away, you would used to write endless piles of CloudFormation. It's painful. Things like CDK, SAM make that easy. You have to write a lot less to get the same thing. Now I'm finding that like LLMs aren't particularly good yet at my core business logic, the bit that I guess is essentially unique to me, what I'm building at that time. But I'm finding them to be very, very good at write me a Lambda function with a queue and a dynamo table with a stream that goes to an event bridge pipe. And it's very, very good at writing that in CDK or CloudFormation or Terraform or anything. So I'm finding myself doing that, and it's shaving tons of time off of the
It's because
writing.
you know the right words to prompt it is why it's good at that.
I know what I want out. Sure, exactly. I know what I want out, and it's good at filling out the bits in the middle, and it's way faster than me having to write it, or it's way quicker than me even copying and pasting it from the last great half-finished project I've got on my personal GitHub.
Yeah, I think this kind of it will replace mid-level is a somewhat naive view of mid-level engineers being the ones that churn out lots of code, because senior engineers spend most of their time reviewing code and mentoring and assisting mid-level and junior. Mid-level actually do quite a lot of coding and junior do quite a lot of learning. And it's kind of that naive view that, oh, you don't need mid-level engineers anymore because all they do is churn code out and agents can do that. But you'd still actually need people to go through that process to become senior and lead and principal and all that jazz above it. So short-sighted, shoot yourself in the foot territory.
Well, we are digressing somewhat from the original article, but I think it's an interesting conversation about what people are doing with AI. But to sort of bring it back to the article, obviously, analysts are expecting AWS is going to invest around about $100 billion in its infrastructure over the next 12 months. And a lot of that, I guess, is going to be supporting running AI, a lot of the compute infrastructure, which is one of the sort of key pillars of AWS's AI strategy, is to have the best infrastructure on which to run your large language models, access large language models, and run your AI-based applications. So, yeah, going to be interesting to see. But it certainly feels like this is not a fad, and it is accelerating, and adoption is on the rise. So on that note, let's move along to our final article for this week. And this one's all about documentation. Engineers, we all love documentation, don't we? And AWS is no exception. Without AWS documentation, I don't think any of us would actually be able to do our jobs or get certified, etc. But there was an article last week on the AWS Insights blog all about AWS documentation updates, progress, challenges, and what's next for 2025. So AWS documentation has always been pretty good, I think. There's usually the answer is there for whatever the question is that you're looking to have answered. But a few new features that are coming. This whole decision guides, I think, was the thing I was looking for. What do you think about that, Ryan? Do you think can you see yourself using the decision guides? Do you know enough about which AWS service is the right one for your needs, or can you see this being useful to you?
I like living in my own little echo chamber. I know what I did yesterday. I'll do it again tomorrow. That's not quite true. I try and adopt new services and use new things all the time, right? It's good to learn, stimulate brain, find the new things all the time. I find myself playing with a lot of new things and services as much as I can, and I think there's going to be a lot of help that you get for like how to get going with something new that comes out of some of these things. And Carl, you touched on it there. Like, I don't think that AWS Docs in general gets enough love or appreciation for, I think, really just how good they really are. Like, all the information you need is in there. Leaving feedback, the team gets back super quick. And I think good documentation is going to help supercharge the AIs doing things for you in a helpful way.
Absolutely, John.
Yeah, historically, I mean, I've always viewed AWS documentation as second only to HashiCorp documentation, to be really honest. AWS docs have always been top tier, just maybe in certain areas, not the best examples or no examples or not fully featured. So you still have to, but here's all the things you can do. Okay, and now I'm trawling through an API document with no, like, I need a full example, please. And if you look at things like Terraform docs and Botto docs and those kinds of things, they do that, and that's really handy. What this is doing, the decision tree, I don't know how much I'm going to use that, because I mean, if you look at if you look at the screenshot, it's CloudTrail or CloudWatch. Well, they're fundamentally different, and I've done the certificate that tells me I know how to pick the one that I need for that. But if you haven't done that, then that's that's massively useful, because it's, well, which one do I need for this thing? Or is it are you logging API requests, or are you logging anything coming out of your application? Because that's the split. But if you don't know that, this is useful. And it goes on for things like that. Bedrock or SageMaker? Well, am I doing any model training? No. Bedrock then. Am I like, that's kind of where the split sort of sits. Lightsail or EC2? Use EC2. Don't be silly. It's that kind of thing. The issue I've always historically had with AWS documentation, and to an extent I have this with most documentation providers, is Google indexes it better than they do. So I search for the thing, Google will find it before their own internal search will have found it. I don't like that, but that's just sort of Google doing Google, realistically. But yeah, Better Docs is good. Better Docs, they talk about doing things with AI and that kind of thing, and using AI to summarize documentation and making it easy for that to happen. Yeah, all good stuff.
Maybe AI is the answer to getting you those answers quicker. Cutting Google
Hi,
out of
Perplexity.
that loop.
Give me I mean, to be fair, that's what I've been doing lately. Again, with Perplexity, like we kind of mentioned, it's, here's the thing: you go and look at the AWS documents, and it'll go, oh, brilliant. So
Why
yeah,
haven't you been
maybe that is
asking
the
Q?
answer. Perplexity's free.
Q has a free tier though, doesn't it?
Q does have a free tier
Yeah.
now, yeah, and that was my issue with Q when it was sort of in preview. Was the pricing is going to look like this, horridly expensive? Now that it's live, oh, the free tier is actually okay, but it's one of those. If you need to be able to hook things that are AWS and not together, then Q starts to fall over.
What about you, Ryan? Are you a Q user, or are you tending to favor third-party tools?
I tried the Q agents in VS Code. It did some things well, it did other things less well, but I found myself falling back to, I think it was Copilot with Claude. Sonnet model is still by far the best agent coding assisting tool that I found so far. But I find myself like pairing a couple of them up together. So I am running Sonnet on Bedrock behind an API gateway to allow me to just write my own queries against Claude directly without needing a Claude subscription. Right? It gets built to my AWS account, which makes things really, really easy, and then integrate with other systems and services that I've got, which is super handy.
So your employer pays for it, and you never see the bill.
My employer pays for it, and I never see the bill. Yes.
I see. I was going to go with your $500 community builder credit covers it, and you never see the bill, but that works too. That's why we need to renew. Really, is we all need our CB money.
Yeah, we use a lot of AI at Motorway and find that it does a lot of things really nicely and easily for us. Doesn't do everything well yet. Does some things well, less things less well. But if it helps speed up some of our processes, then,
nice. Well, if we had more time, I'd love to drill into that more, but we have really reached the end of our time for season 4, episode 7 of Logicast. Just on the point of HashiCorp documentation being as good, if not better, than AWS's. They also have lovely t-shirts, HashiCorp, which I picked up at reInvent. So very comfortable. Anyway, on that note, as I said, we have reached the end of our time for season 4, episode 7 of Logicast. So thank you very much, Ryan, for taking time out of your day to share your insights with us. It's been great to have you along as our guest. And thank you, John, as always. You don't really have a choice. Well, everyone has a choice, but you love it so much that the only choice is to co-host the podcast with me every week. So
yeah, this gets me out of real work. So why would I not do this?
Absolutely. So thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, we are available to download from wherever you get your podcast. So if you have enjoyed listening to the podcast, please like it, share it, tell your friends. If you'd like to see my lovely HashiCorp t-shirt and Ryan's rather fetching mustache, we're also available to watch on YouTube. So check it out, like and subscribe. We'll be back next week with another episode of Logicast for you. Until then, thanks for listening. See you next time.